Hi, it's Mrs. Shockley. I'm so glad you're joining me today. We are going to start the new book of the week, which is The Magic Treehouse, book number 10, Ghost Town at Sundown. And this is written by Mary Pope Osborne. So, last week you were doing a great job of building background about the ecosystem that this book is going to be taking place in. So I hope that as we're reading, some of the things you learned last week, you'll be able to hear about them and know a little bit more about what's happening in the story. Before we begin though, so excited I have my big cards. For today's chapter, I want you to practice our strategy of visualizing. So here's our card for visualization. And remember that in some books, especially books like the Magic Treehouse books where there's not a lot of pictures, we need to try to visualize what we're hearing in our mind. So as I read chapter 1 today, let's almost build that movie in our mind. Okay, so chapter 1 of Ghost Town at Sundown is called How Wild? Jack and Annie were sitting on the porch of their house. Annie was gazing down the street at the Frog Creek woods. Jack was reading a book. I have a feeling we should check the woods again, said Annie. Why? Said Jack, without looking up. A rabbit's hopping by, said Annie. So? We've seen rabbits before. Not like this one, said Annie. What do you mean? Jack stood up and looked with her. He saw a rabbit with very long legs hopping down their street. Soon the rabbit left the sidewalk and headed into the woods. He's a sign, said Annie. A sign of what? Said Jack. That Morgan's back, said Annie. She jumped off the porch. Come on! But what about dinner? Jack said. Dad said it would be ready soon. Don't worry, said Annie. You know, when we leave the treehouse, time stops. She ran across their yard. Jack put on his backpack. Back in 10 minutes, he called through the screen door. Then he followed Annie. They hurried down their street and into the Frog Creek woods. The sun was setting above the trees. There he is, said Annie. The rabbit was standing in a ray of sunlight. When he saw them, he took off. So right now I'm imagining Jack and Annie at the edge of the woods and a little rabbit, and they said it's, Mary Pope Osborne said it's a ray of sunlight shining on the rabbit. So I'm imagining, visualizing the sunlight just on top of the rabbit, and then Jack and Annie spotting the rabbit and taking off after him. All right, let's keep reading. Jack and Annie followed the rabbit until he vanished behind the tallest tree. I told you, see? Said Annie, panting. She pointed up at the tree. Morgan Le Fay was waving to them from the magic treehouse, high in the branches. Jack and Annie waved back to her. As always, Jack was very happy to see the enchantress librarian again. Oh, come on up, she said. Jack and Annie started up the rope ladder. They climbed up to the treehouse. We followed a strange rabbit here, said Annie. Is he your friend? Perhaps, said Morgan. She smiled mysteriously. I have many odd friends. Including us, said Annie. Morgan laughed. That's right. How are you? Said Jack. I'm still having problems with Merlin, said the enchantress, which leaves me little time to do my real work. But soon you both will become master librarians, and that will be a big help to me. Jack smiled. He was going to be a master librarian who traveled through time and space. It was almost too good to believe. Are you ready to solve another riddle? Asked Morgan. Yes, said Jack and Annie together. Good, said Morgan. First you'll need this for research. She pulled a book from her robe and handed it to Jack. It was the book that would help them on their journey. The title of the book was Days of the Wild West. On the cover was a picture of a western town on a prairie. Ooh, kind of like the cover of our book, I think. "Oh, wow," said Annie. "The Wild West." Jack took a deep breath. Just how wild, he wondered. Morgan reached into the folds of her robe again and pulled out a scroll. She handed it to Annie. "Read this when the treehouse lands," she said. "Is it the riddle?" asked Jack. "Yes," said Morgan. "Then you'll only have 2 more to solve. Are you ready to go?" Jack and Annie nodded. Annie pointed to the picture on the cover of the Wild West book. "I wish we could go there," she said. The wind started to blow. "Goodbye," said Morgan. "Good luck." The treehouse started to spin. Jack squeezed his eyes shut. The treehouse spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Jack opened his eyes. Morgan Le Fay was gone. A fly buzzed around his head. The end. So, they're back at the treehouse. They have a new riddle to solve, and they're going to the Wild West. Now, chapter 2 is called Rattlesnake Flats. We'll read that next time. Thanks for listening.